Hello, I'm doing a video today because I just could not get through everything in class. We had lots to do. We had some great discussion, which I would never give up in order to get more material in. And whenever I've been out, I like to go over things. Even though I know the sub went over it with you, I just like to do it again. So in the process of doing those things, I wasn't able to get finished with all my plans. So we're going to finish them here on the video. I promise you I will try to go as quickly as I can, but I'm going to be covering your grammar lesson. I want to give you an introduction to Act 3 and Romeo and Juliet, and a few last instructions for the essay that you will be completing this week. So the video probably will be more than 30 minutes, but who knows? We'll see how it goes. So let's start with grammar. We're still in chapter 3 on pronouns. So I'd like for you to get out your grammar book and open it to page, whoops, got that on the wrong page. Open it to the page 58, which is the beginning of 5 different types of pronouns. 2 of them we kind of put together. They work in a similar fashion, but there's 5 different kinds. So we're going to start with the first kind, which is called demonstrative. So I have some sentences that I have written, and I want you to take a look at them, and I want you to think about if we were using pronouns, which one would you put in the blank? So if I was talking about this glue stick right here, and the glue stick was sitting way over here on the other side of my desk, and I said, please bring me, if I were choosing between pronouns, this, these, that, and those, which one would you pick? Please bring me that glue stick. All right, on the next sentence, if I were holding up these paper clips here, I've got 3 paper clips, and I said, I need, what pronoun would you use? I need these. So that would be another demonstrative pronoun. The next sentence says, I do not need any of, and I'm going to show you my 2 rulers. So there's 2 of them. I don't need any of, you see that blank is going to be those. I don't need any of those. And the last one, I'm going to show you a pen. So if we're using the demonstrative pronouns, which one fits the blank? Uh-oh, I think I smeared. Blank is my favorite pen. This is my favorite pen. So those are what we call our demonstrative pronouns. This, these, that, and those. Now in your book, I want you to write what I have written here in blue. When you're talking about things that are new, not new, near, you're going to use the pronouns this and these. Like I did with this is my favorite pen, and I do not need these. They were both near. If you're talking about far, you would say that and those. I told you that glue stick was way over there. I don't need that. All right, so things that are near are this and these, and things that are far are that and those. That's all common sense. I think as you work on the sentences that are coming up next, we're going to do a couple of examples, and then as you do them in your homework, you're going to see that that's pretty easy. So let's look at a couple of the examples. Let's look at 3:14. It says, underline the demonstrative pronoun. So all you have to do is find it. You don't even have to pick the one that's the best one. You just have to find the demonstrative pronoun. This sentence says, this is a book with interesting stories. Did you underline this? That was quick. Go ahead and do 3 and 5. Read them. If you need to put me on pause, you can. And after you read them, I'm going to give you the answers. Number 3, you should have underlined these. And number 5, again, underline the word these. So do the evens on 3:14. 315, you have to choose the word that belongs in the blank. So read number 1 on your own. Looking at your 4 demonstrative pronouns, pick the one that is going to fill in that blank correctly. All right, your best answer is these. Number 3, blank is a powerful story about Lot's selfish choosing of the more fertile land. And the best answer is this is a powerful story. So with these, you're going to have to ask yourself, there may be more than one pronoun that will actually fit in the blank. You have to decide, is something near or far, and which is going to be the best answer. Be sure you check your answers after you've completed your homework. Check and make sure they're right. All right, the next type of pronoun we're going to look at is on page 60, and that's the interrogative pronouns. And you already know what the word interrogative means. It has to do with asking questions. And that's what these pronouns do. These pronouns ask questions. And they do not have antecedents. Because it's a question, there's not going to be an antecedent. The answer to the question would be the antecedent. And I know y'all talked about that word last week. Miss Hayes told me she was very carefully went over the word and the pronunciation and what it meant. So interrogative pronouns, because they're asking questions, don't have that antecedent. Now, I also want you to write something down in your book that has to do with how to pick the correct interrogative pronoun. And so it's in green. I want you to write down in the margin whom, and that always is going to lead you to him. And who, that always works like the word he. So whom and him function in the same way, and who and he function in the same way. So when you're trying to figure out whether or not you need the word who or whom, check and see which of the words him or who would work in the sentence. So the interrogative pronouns, and you see that they're listed here on page 60, are who, whose, and whom, which, and what. They kind of remind you of those newspaper words, who, what, when, where, why, and then how. So they're similar in that they're asking questions. When you're using subjective pronoun who, you can know that's correct because you know he would fit in that spot, and it's going to be in the subject part of the sentence. If you're using the objective whom, you can tell that it's going to be correct if you could use him in its place, and it would make sense. And also, him is always going to be in the part of the sentence that's receiving action, the objective case for that pronoun. So let's look at a couple of these. Number 1 in exercise 316 says in the scripture, who was rewarded for obedience? And you're supposed to find the interrogative pronoun. Pretty easy. Number 1 is who. Read number 3. And the interrogative pronoun is what? And then let's skip to number 7. Read number 7. And the pronoun you should underline is whom. So you're going to go back and do evens in 316. Let's look at 317. This time, you're going to pick which of the interrogative pronouns you will use in the sentence. And you're going to choose the one that's going to give you the best answer, the one that makes the most sense and sounds correct grammatically. So number 1 says, the Book of Martyrs was written by, and you're trying to decide, it's not going to be what, because that doesn't sound like a person. And it's not going to be whose or which. So that leaves us with who or whom. The Book of Martyrs was written by. If you're not sure which one to use, try he and try him. The Book of Martyrs was written by he. The Book of Martyrs was written by him. Him works there, and so you know that since him is connected with whom, that whom is the correct answer for number 1. Questions are always tricky, so just keep in mind anytime you're dealing with questions that makes the finding correct answers a little more difficult. Number 3, blank of the martyrs did he write about? Oh, another question. Now there's a couple of answers that would work here. The book says the answer you should choose is which of the martyrs did he write about? But I think that who of the martyrs did he write about? Would that work? Who? He of the martyrs did he write about? He wrote about he. No, I don't think who would work. Whom of the martyrs did he write about? That would work. Whom would work because him would fit in there if you flip that sentence and turn it into a sentence instead of an interrogative. But which is the best answer? Which is? I'm not asking a question. Which is the correct answer? Let's look at number 5. Oh, these are hard. Blank was an interesting story. So they're saying this story belongs to someone. How would you show that? Using the interrogative pronouns. And the best choice is whose. But I'll go ahead and tell you these are all hard with the questions, so do your best with them. Check your answers with the book, but no, I'm not going to give you questions like this on your test. Your sentences will be declarative and not interrogative. Okay, and then exercise 3:18, you just need to rewrite the sentences into questions using those interrogative pronouns. So just do the evens, rewrite, change the statement into a question. So that shouldn't be too hard. That's probably easier than the exercise 3:17. So change the declarative statement into a question using those interrogative pronouns. So it's kind of like you're becoming a teacher and writing a quiz. All right. Now the next one, not last yet. The next one we're going to look at is the one where they have the pronouns grouped together. And so on page 62, they're grouping reflexive and intensive pronouns. Now, my words are getting erased. The main difference in these two pronouns is the way that they're used, their function. And oh, you're going to hear me say that all year long. You've already heard me say it a lot, and we're going to keep saying it, is we have to look at how words function in the sentence, because you can't say some word is always a noun, it's always a verb, you can't even say things are always adjectives or always adverbs. It depends on how it functions in a particular sentence. So with these pronouns, reflexive pronouns function as a complement, and intensive pronouns emphasize, but they don't really serve a particular function other than emphasizing something in the sentence. And you can easily pick out intensive pronouns because you can remove it from the sentence and the sentence still makes sense. So reflexive functions as a complement. That would be a direct object, an indirect object, or an object of the preposition. Those are all complements. Complements receive action. And then, or we're talking about intensives, which always emphasizes in the sentence, and it can be taken out without it hurting the meaning of the sentence. So let's look at a few of these, and you can read all of that here. Highlight what you need to highlight when we're doing this on doing the videos. Put notes in the margins as you need. That's why I'm showing you some of the boards, is so you can put notes in the margins to help you remember. So let's move over to page 63, and we're going to do a few of these together, and then you're going to do the evens at home. So number 1, we want to look at the italicized pronoun and decide if it is reflexive or intensive. And I'll go ahead and remind you the easiest way to see if it's intensive is you can take it out and the sentence still makes sense. If that happens, you know it's not receiving any action, it's not a compliment, or it would mess up the sentence. And what it's doing there, its purpose is just to emphasize something that's already been said. So, number one, at certain times, a young person may think only about himself. And the italicized word is himself. So if we look at reflexive, that it receives action, then, and we look at in the different places how something can receive action. And if you look here right in front of the word himself, you'll see the word about, and about is a preposition. So when you have a preposition, you know that the word that comes behind it or the next several words behind it are going to be a part of that prepositional phrase. An object of the preposition, which is how himself is acting in a sentence, is going to be receiving action, and it becomes a complement. And since it's a complement, it's reflexive. If I try to take it out, if I leave out that word, you'll see the sentence doesn't make sense. At certain times, a young person may think only about. So I need that word in the sentence to make that sentence true. So that is a reflexive pronoun. Number 3, the family itself did not have much money. And you see the italicized word is itself. So I'm looking and I don't see a preposition around it. If I think about all the functions of the words in that sentence, I know the subject is family. I know the verb is did have with not being an adverbial complement. So the family did have, and I asked the question what? They had money. So money is the direct object because it answers what. So itself isn't a part of any of that complement. It doesn't receive any action. So I'm going to check to be sure it's intensive by leaving it out and seeing if the sentence still makes sense. The family did not have much money. And so you see when I read it, leaving out the word itself, that sentence still works. So itself is an intensive pronoun. All right, look at number 5. Catherine and her friends wanted expensive graduation presents for themselves. Themselves is italicized. So I'm going to look around it first because remember I keep telling you guys if you'll learn what your prepositions are, and we're going to talk about them later in the book. Almost feels like it seems like we should do prepositions sooner. But if you'll learn what they are so you can recognize them in sentences, it's always good to start there and get those out of the way. So if we look for prepositions here, I see one, and that's the word for. So what comes directly behind that within that phrase is all a part of that prepositional phrase. So this is for themselves. That makes themselves an object of the preposition, which is a complement. It's receiving action. So I think this is going to be reflexive, but I'm going to check. If I leave it out, it should still work. So let me leave out the word themselves. Catherine and her friends wanted expensive graduation presents for. It doesn't work if I leave it out. The sentence no longer makes sense. I know it's missing something. So that is a reflexive pronoun, not intensive. Remember, intensive just emphasizes you can leave it out and it still works. You'll see at the top of page 63 there's a box with reflexive and intensive pronouns. But remember, you can tell the difference between them by how they function in the sentence. All right, so you're going to do the evens on 319. You're going to do the evens also on 320 and 321. And I'm not going to do any practice in 320 because I kind of did that with the first one I gave practice in. I was naming how all the words in the sentences worked, what function they were serving in the sentence. And so that's what you're going to do here. The directions in 320 is underline the reflexive pronouns once, the intensive pronouns twice. If the pronoun is reflexive, write the function in the blank. And in case you forgot, go back and look at page 62, and it tells you what the three functions of reflexive pronouns are. Direct objects, which means after you say the verb, they answer what. Indirect objects, which means after you found a direct object, it answers to who or for who or whom. And then the third one is objects of prepositions, and that's when you have a preposition and the words that are following are part of that prepositional phrase, and that's where you found the pronoun. So those are your three functions you'll be looking at: DO, IO, and OP. And remember, intensives, you don't have to say what their function is because they're not actually forming a function in the sentence, they're just emphasizing, but you want to tell us what word it's emphasizing. So I am going to do one of those. Let's look at number 5. It says, Betsy's neighbors themselves knew about the American General Skinner. Now, I've already cued you in. This is going to be intensive because I said I wanted to show you how to do it. So you see the word themselves as the pronoun. So we're going to, and I've already told you it's intensive, it's not reflexive, it's not forming a complement function in this sentence. So the next thing we have to do for the blank on the outside is tell what word it is emphasizing. So if I leave it out, Betsy's neighbors knew about the American General Skinner. You see it works. So themselves refers to what word in the sentence? Not Betsy, because Betsy's singular, so it can't be themselves for Betsy. And it can't be American General Skinner, because again, that's singular, and themselves is plural. So the only word that makes sense for it to emphasize, plus it's right next to it, is neighbors. And neighbors is what should be on the blank. So that's what you're doing in this section. If it's reflexive, name the function and underline it once. If it's intensive, name the word it's emphasizing, and then underline that pronoun twice. And then on page 65, you're going to rewrite sentences. It says to add intensive pronouns to emphasize certain elements in the sentences below. So you can pick what you want to emphasize, what intensive pronoun you want to use, but that's your whole purpose on this section, is intensive pronouns. And then now we're at the last one. This is indefinite pronouns, and I'm on page 66. I'm just going to look at the top where the definition is. We use indefinite pronouns when we want to speak in general terms. Unlike other pronouns, indefinite pronouns do not refer to specific persons or things. So that fits with the word indefinite. It's not specific, and they do not have antecedents, which you remember what other pronoun did not have an antecedent? I hope you said interrogative, because that would be correct. And that in an interrogative, it's asking a question, and that's why it doesn't have an antecedent. Here, it's not specific, and that's why it doesn't have the antecedent. So you can see that the examples they give you at the top of the page are someone and anybody. Those are both indefinite pronouns. They don't refer to a specific person. It could be a number of people. If I were in the classroom, we were in the classroom together, and I said, someone come help me, that's telling you it doesn't matter to me who comes help. I just need someone. So it's not specific. It's indefinite. And then you'll see, look at the list there on page 66 of words that are always singular, these indefinite pronouns, those that are always plural, and then the ones that can be singular or plural depending on how it's used in the sentence. So that's pretty self-explanatory. You can see in the always singular, you see the word one or thing in most of them, or the last line says each, one, much, little, and less. That the much, little, and less might be something you have to just commit to memory. It may not seem like it just means one. Always plural, those make sense. And then singular or plural, these you just have to be careful. It depends on if it's being used as a collective or if it's talking a collective group, like we talked about team, how team can be collective and stand for one thing within a group, but how team could also be used as individuals on the team depending on the way the sentence is written. So that's how these words can be sometimes singular, sometimes plural. So just be careful when you are writing that you probably the best thing to do is read aloud to hear if your singular and plural words are matching up with each other. Okay, let's look at exercise 322. Underline the indefinite pronoun and in the blank, label the pronoun singular or plural. And always go back and use the things in the book to help you get these answers right. And always go back and check it with the teacher's edition. I do that every week because you don't want to practice something wrong. And you never know when I'm going to give a pop book quiz. And when I give one, you want to make 100 on it. And the way you can guarantee that is by always checking your work with your teacher's edition so that you know everything in your grammar book is 100% correct. All right, let's look at number 1. A few of the greatest tragedies in history occurred because of people who did not listen to warnings. All right, the indefinite pronoun is few, and using your list, is few singular or plural? It's plural. All right, let's look at number 3. The Titanic had been constructed and engineered with all of the technology available in the early 1900s. What's the indefinite pronoun? All. And is all singular or plural? This is the tricky one. All, in this case, is singular because it's talking about the technology within a one group. And all there is talking about the group. So it's singular. Let's do one more. The ship, number 5. The ship was constructed with 16 watertight compartments, and several of these compartments would have to flood completely to pose a danger. And your indefinite pronoun is several. And if you look up there to see if that is singular or plural, you'll see several is plural. All right, exercise 323. You're going to write an appropriate indefinite pronoun to complete the sentences. Try not to use any one pronoun more than once. And if you look at the teacher editions, you'll see it says answers may vary. So there's not only one right answer, but if you get an answer different than what the book says, you need to make sure your answer also makes sense. Just read it out loud. And if you're still not sure, ask your mom or dad. And hopefully y'all can figure out together if yours will work. And if you still can't, then put down what's in the book. Okay, and then we're going to do, I thought I was done, but we've got one more. I think this is the last one. Relative pronouns. All right, relative pronouns. I'm on page 68. The relative pronoun are the words who, whom, whose, which, and that. And a relative pronoun relates to a dependent clause. It relates a dependent clause to the rest of the sentence. The antecedent of the relative pronoun is a noun in the independent clause. Before I go any further, let me check. I am thinking I wasn't going to do relative today. I think I was supposed to stop. So let me go check my thing over here real quick. I think relative is next time. So 58 through 68 was today's assignments. So that's done. So I gave you a little bitty introduction into next week, but we're going to finish pronouns next week and do relative pronouns and references and what was the last one? Indefinite uses of a some of the different pronouns. We're going to do all the tricky stuff next week in class. So through 68, exercise 323 is the last you have to do this week. So we have covered that. So hopefully that gets you moving on your grammar. Now I'm looking for Romeo and Juliet, where I put it. Ah, here we go. Romeo and Juliet. I forgot to give you your questions for this week in class. So I will attach them to the email that will also have this video on it. So you'll have your questions to work with. And in class next week, I want to talk about the graph that I put on the board, the chart. You probably saw it in class. And I don't want to try to do that on video. So when we start class next week, we're going to talk about exposition in writing, rising action, climax, falling action, and denouement. So we'll do that next week when we start. So all I want to do is preview Act 3 for you. Act 3 is the climax of the play. And hopefully after we talk about some of those words next week in class, you'll understand better what that means. Basically, it's the high action, the high point of the play. As we start out in scene 1, Benvolio is saying hot weather makes people hot-headed. And then Mercutio accuses Benvolio of also being a hot-headed person. But as we've learned about these two friends, we know that that of the two of them, Mercutio is much more likely to pop off about something and lose his temper. And Benvolio is much more relaxed and laid back. And so all the things that Mercutio says on the next couple of pages are really less about Benvolio and more about himself. And it's kind of setting up what's going to happen as we go through this scene. So when you hit to page 117, you'll see a little way down the page that Tybalt and some other men that are with him have entered. And now Tybalt and Mercutio are going to begin to spar with words. And so Mercutio is trying to start a fight, and Tybalt is always ready for a fight. Benvolio tries to get them to reason, but they won't be listening. They're not listening to that. And then on page 119, Romeo comes in. And remember, at the end of Act 2, Romeo and Juliet are married. So Romeo is now married to Juliet, and so that means he has become cousins with Tybalt because Juliet is cousins with Tybalt. So Romeo is too. So as you read on this page, you'll hear Tybalt telling Romeo he hates him, but Romeo keeps saying, I can't tell you why, but I don't hate you. I love you. I just can't tell you why yet. And of course, we in the audience know it's because he has married into the family. And so now, because he and Tybalt are family, he can't hate him anymore. So Romeo is trying to back out of this fight. Benvolio is trying to keep everybody calm. But Mercutio and Tybalt are set to fight with each other. At the bottom of page 119, you'll see Mercutio says, Good king of cats, nothing but one of your 9 lives. I mean to make bold with you, and if you fight me hereafter, beat the rest. So what Mercutio is saying, if you'll remember, we talked about the name Tybalt comes from a folk tale or a fairy tale that would have been known at this time, and Tybalt is the cat in this fairy tale. And so Mercutio is reminding Tybalt that his name comes from a fairy tale, and he's saying, you are the king of cats, and cats have 9 lives, and I'm going to take one of them from you. So you see on page 129, Romeo still tries to break this fight up. And then, this is so understated in our book, But the second line says, Romeo says, "Gentle Mercutio, put your rapier up," and that means your sword. And Mercutio says, "Come, sir, with your sword play." And he's talking to Tybalt. And then it says, "They fight." Well, that's just two little bitty words inside parentheses, but on stage, this would be a huge sword fight. Huge, and it might have lasted for minutes as these two are fighting because evidently they both are good swordsmen. So Romeo is trying to get them to stop because Mercutio is his friend and now Tybalt is his kinsman. So he's trying to stop. So he gets himself between them and he's facing Mercutio and actually holds on to Mercutio's arms so that he can't thrust his sword or fight. And when he does that, Tybalt takes advantage because he's behind Romeo and he forces his sword under Romeo's arms where he's holding Tybalt, and the sword stabs Mercutio. Um, when that happens, Mercutio says, "I am hurt." And then he says, "A plague on both your houses." And he's talking to Romeo and he's talking to Tybalt because, as far as everybody else knows, Romeo is still a Montague and only connected with the Montague family, and Tybalt is a Capulet. And so Mercutio is saying, "It's both of your fault. Why do your families have to be fighting in the first place? A plague on both your houses." And this is a little bit of foreshadowing because at the end of the novel, you'll see that both houses or both families suffer because of what has happened. So this lets us know that this is this plague, these bad things are going to come on both of the houses. Um, through the end of this page, Mercutio wants to get into a house somewhere. He doesn't want to faint or die on the street. And so he knows that no matter if they get a doctor there, the wound is too grave, too serious for him to live. And so I want you to look on page 121. Mercutio is talking close to the bottom of the page, and he says, "No, it is not as deep as a well, nor wide as a church door, but it is enough." He's saying it's not a huge wound, but I can tell this wound is enough and it will do. He says, ask for me tomorrow, and you shall find me a grave man." And so even in this case, Mercutio is still making puns. Most of the time, if you told someone, I'm going to be a grave man, it means I'm serious. I'm going to be serious faced and there'll be no humor in me. But Mercutio is actually saying, I'm going to be a grave man, as literally, I will be a man in a grave. That's what Mercutio is predicting. Then on this is kind of a long scene. On page 123, Romeo says that his love for Juliet has taken away his manhood. And now, because he's become wimpy, his best friend is dead. So Romeo is now preparing to fight Tybalt. And Romeo knows that in order to defend his honor and Mercutio's honor, that he needs to fight him. So you see in the middle of the page, Tybalt comes back, and no one really knows why he came back. My only guess is to boast that he won the fight. He may not have known he killed Mercutio, but in any case, he returns, and Romeo challenges him and says that this challenge is going to be the death of one or both of them. But only one or none will walk away from this. They start to fight, and I don't think the fight lasts very long in this case, and Tybalt falls. Romeo wins, but he's won this fight, and he's proved this point, but now he has to leave because he's become an outlaw in the city, and he has killed Juliet's cousin. So once again, when you look at the top of page 125, you see Romeo saying, "Oh, I am fortune's fool." And so once again, he's not really taking responsibility for his own actions. He's saying that this was just a bad luck, bad fortune, bad destiny. It's not his own fault he's in this predicament. It's destiny. And then he leaves, and the prince comes in with Romeo's father, Juliet's mother and father, and a few other people come in. So the prince says, "What has happened here? Who started this fight?" And you'll see that on this page and the next that Benvolio explains what happens, and he's pretty fair about explaining what happened. Lady Capulet doesn't want to believe what Benvolio's saying. She says because Benvolio is Romeo's friend that he must be lying. And then, of course, Montague, Romeo's father, is there, and he's defending his son. The prince hears both sides. He hears what Benvolio says, and then he exiles Romeo and requires a high fine from both families because of this long feud that he told them they needed to stop. They needed to settle it. So he says, "I'm going to grant some mercy to Romeo. He can leave this city, but if he ever comes back, he'll be killed." And then that's scene 1, which I said is pretty long. Scene 2 is shorter. Scene 2 is in the Capulet's orchard, and so Juliet is here, and she's here by herself, and she's talking to herself. And if you'll remember, we called this a soliloquy, when one of the characters speaks aloud, but it's really what their thoughts are. But so the audience can know what's happening, they say it aloud as a speech. So you have to remember, Romeo and Juliet are married, but no one knows this except for Romeo, Juliet, the nurse, and Friar Lawrence. And Juliet is waiting for night because that's when she and Romeo will meet. That's when he's going to come to her window. So she wants the day to hurry away so night can be there. And that's what she's saying in that long soliloquy. The nurse gets there and she's anxious. And we already know from having back in scene 6, we know that the nurse has a tendency to tease Juliet and made her wait for news on how they were going to get married. I guess that was scene 5. So here again, Juliet's watching the nurse and she's thinking she's going to do the same thing. And the nurse just starts talking. She just says, "He's dead, he's dead, he's dead." And so the nurse is talking about Tybalt. That's what we know. But Juliet thinks the nurse is talking about Romeo because that's who's been on her mind. So again, we have some dramatic irony here where the audience knows something that all the characters on the play don't know yet. So as you read through this, you'll see that Nurse really confuses Juliet, the way she's trying to tell what happened. So Juliet thinks Romeo is dead. Then she thinks Romeo has killed himself. And so she begins to mourn Romeo. And then she thinks both Romeo and Tybalt are dead. And finally, on page 133, she gets it straight. At first, she's really mad that Romeo has done this, but then she comes to the understanding that if he hadn't killed Tybalt, Tybalt would have killed Romeo. And she says that that would have been worse than if she had lost all her family. And so she didn't want Romeo to be killed by Tybalt, and so this appears to be the only way Romeo could have lived. On page 135, that's when she's reasoning this out. So you can read that and you'll see her thought process as she works that out for herself. And then as you're finishing up scene 2, there are a couple of things I want you to keep in mind about Romeo and Juliet. It'll help you understand the mood of the play. The first one is that Romeo and Juliet live in the night. They meet at night. They make plans at night. They got married at night. And then here again, she was waiting on him at night. This whole thing of everything in their lives, everything of importance happening at night, sets them apart from the rest of the world. They live while everyone else is asleep. And their love, because it happens at night when everyone else is sleeping, their love is kind of like a dream. So that's something that you'll see runs through the play and kind of sets a mood. This thing that what they have between them separates them from everyone else. It makes them different and unique. And then the other thing that we can see happening as we're starting in Act 3 is that relationship that Juliet has with Nurse is starting to change. And where at the beginning of the novel, Nurse is more like her mother than Juliet's own mother, and Nurse knows Juliet and almost knows what she's going to say before she says it. Now that a little bit of time has passed, Nurse doesn't always understand Juliet anymore. And as Romeo and Juliet's relationship gets stronger, the connection between Nurse and Juliet is getting weaker. So basically, what that's telling us is that Juliet is maturing out of little girlhood into womanhood. And so that's what we can expect to see in her as we move through the rest of Act 3. And remember, Act 3, even though we're just doing scene 1 and 2 this week, this whole act is the climax of the play. So like I said, I'll send you your page and you can answer your questions there, but hopefully that conversation will help you as you get ready to read. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about your essays. Most of you have already completed your essay or you're almost there. And I'm really proud of you for working ahead, doing more than what you had to do, because that helps you in the long run. It made it so I was able to give you a lot of notes and comments and suggestions on your essays that you sent me this past week. What all you're supposed to be doing this week is working on your conclusion and then editing and revising. So I gave you some handouts in class that I hope if you will read through them, they'll help you. Just to remind you how this is a descriptive essay, not just informational. And so we're talking about showing the things that you're writing about and not just telling about it. And the way you do that is by choosing the best words to describe. We want to pay really close attention to words that talk about what we see and hear and smell and touch and sometimes taste, depending on what you're writing about. I gave you a handout called Descriptive Essays Don't Tell, Show. So you should read that front and back, and it will give you some hints. There's also a link at the bottom if you want to go to where I found this. You might be able to find some more information to help you if you're struggling in this last part of the essay, getting your conclusion and making sure it's very, very descriptive. I also gave you a handout that on the front it says, what is a descriptive essay? So it's just some more things that you can check off to see how you're doing. On the back, this is how I'm going to grade your descriptive essay. So you can see all the points I'll be using as I grade. And you'll see that style is a part of this grading sheet and it's 20 points. So, so you want to be sure that you are doing those style things about descriptive writing, that you're painting a picture, your 5 senses are addressed as long as they all 5 fit. I know, I'm trying to think what topics. I know somebody's writing about Star Wars, so taste may not fit in their Star Wars paper. So use all of the senses that do make sense. But this way you'll know exactly what I'm looking for when I go to grade. And then your process this week, other than writing your conclusion, if you haven't done that yet, is you're going to be doing 2 parts of polishing your paper. Those 2 parts are called revising and editing. They're similar, but they're different. And I really liked this picture. It's not real clear because I copied it from another picture, but it's reminding you that editing is the grammar part. Spelling, punctuation, capitalization, subject-verb agreement. Editing needs to be done on your paper, and make sure that you have as much correct as possible in your editing. Revising makes your paper sound better. In order to do revisions, you have to read your paper out loud. And if you think somebody's going to be listening to you, then go up in your room and close the door and read it quietly. But you need to hear your paper out loud for revision. If you've ever worked with me in person in working on a paper, I read it out loud. And when I'm working on your papers at home, I do the same thing. I read them out loud so I can hear how it sounds. So be sure you're doing both, revising and editing. And then the last thing I have for you is a checklist to help you with editing and revising. And so you got your checklist on mechanics, grammar, and style. And then on your revisions, things you should add, things you should remove, things you might should move, and things that you should substitute. So these are just great pages to help you look over your paper, because if the way you think you edit and revise is you just look at it and see how it looks and then go, that looks good, that's not editing and revising. You want to be sure what you turn into me is as close to perfect as you can get. And I'm happy to help. That's why I love that review too on Word. I will help you as much as I can if you give me enough time. I will tell you that I'm going to Florida tomorrow. Yay! With my husband. We're taking a short trip and I'll be gone Friday through Tuesday, but I will have my laptop. I'll look at it some. If I get some papers in, I will try to sit down and look at the papers and give you some comments. Most of you should be at a point where you should be applying all that stuff I already told you. And if when I look at your paper again, there shouldn't be a whole lot more for me to make comments on. But I will do my best to get that to you. And of course, I'll be coming home on Tuesday, and anything that you have emailed to me, I will. My plan is to get it downloaded into my laptop so I can work on it while I'm in the car. And so I will be driving home Tuesday. I'll have Wednesday at home, and then we have class on Thursday. So if you have questions, you can email me, but just know that I may not be able to get back to you as quickly as I usually can during the week. So that gets us through all our stuff. I'm looking at my time, about 51 minutes. This will probably be the longest um, video that we have this year, but we just still have a lot to do. So I hope that it helped you, and I look forward to seeing you next Thursday. So bye.